Howdy! As I started my research for this lesson, my mind told me, well, this will be short. And for me, it actually is. Surprise, surprise. That takes nothing away from day 3. Like all days of creation, it was amazing. God said, "Let the waters below the heavens be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees on the earth bearing fruit after their kind with seed in them." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed after their kind, and trees bearing fruit with seed in them after their kind. And God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning, a third day. Genesis 1:9-13. On day 3, we see God finish his prep work of making the earth suitable for sustaining the life he will place on it during days 4, 5, and 6. Today we see a threefold act of creation: the creation of the seas, the creation of dry land, and the creation of plants. It seems pretty straightforward. At the start of day 3, the earth is a water-covered planet that has gravity and is spinning. There are periods of light and darkness, and there is a layer of breathable atmosphere surrounding it. There is also water that has been flung out into the second heaven, somewhere in the area of the universe we call space, but exactly where it is and in what form, we do not know. As we come to the beginning of day 3, God said, "Let the waters below the heavens be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. It seems simple enough. God made land, and God made the seas. Easy peasy, right? Yet, I fear we have become so familiar with the words that we may be allowing familiarity to interfere with the awe and wonder of this event. I want to take a little extra time in this lesson to think about what may have happened during this miracle day in order that we may be prompted to give God the glory he deserves. Scriptures tell us in Job 38:7, all the sons of God shouted for joy while observing the creative hand of God. We, however, cannot observe what happened. This video is not on YouTube, but still, we should remind ourselves, our minds, our imagination, of the power, majesty, and wonder of our God as spoken in his word, so that we may also shout for joy at the work of his creative hand. Think about it. What had to happen, and what might have it looked like when the waters below the heavens were gathered into one place and the dry land appeared? At the risk of sounding a little old-fashioned, I believe it looked cool. Really cool. Let's start with the land. Even many secular scientists believe that originally our planet had only one continent. Secular scientists refer to it as Pangea, a Greek compound word meaning entire earth. God was a little more succinct. He called the dry land earth. Even grade school children can look at a globe and see that if you could push all the land masses together, generally speaking, they would fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. Originally, it seems, God created one landmass. We don't actually know how large it was or what its shape was at creation. We don't know if some of the original landmass was lost to the oceans in the Great Flood, or if additional landmass was added during the flood. We'll talk about those things in more detail when we study Noah's flood. I imagine that the earth had as its outline beauty and symmetry, because God basically doesn't know how to do it any other way. I also do not think that the current miles high mountain ranges, such as the Andes, the Himalayas, the Alps, or the Rockies that we see in today's earth, were present at the original creation of dry land. Mountain ranges cause barriers and weather that contributes to deserts being formed. I do not believe that was an original part of creation. I could be wrong, but I don't think deserts were around at the beginning of creation. But that is a guess, and I do not know for certain. Creation scientists are pretty certain that the mountain ranges were a result of the cataclysm of Noah's flood as they were thrust up from the ocean floors. This would explain the fossilized shells and sea creatures found at their tops. Also, as the floodwaters covered the entire earth, I don't believe the water reached the depth of 5.5 miles all the way around the earth during the flood, which is what it would have taken to cover Mount Everest. There is not enough water on our planet to do that, and it would have taken the ark to an altitude that didn't have enough oxygen to keep the occupants alive. Again, a subject we'll look at in more detail as we get there in our study of Genesis. My speculation, and it is only speculation as I wasn't there, and neither, by the way, was Google Earth. My speculation is that the earth had gently rolling hills, some small, some larger, maybe a few plateaus, but that is just a guess. I am convinced that God is an artist at heart, and I can't imagine there was nothing but flat plains with no surface variations. That would be boring, and God is not boring. Now, a few things to think about regarding the miracle of the dry land. First of all, it was dry. If you or I were to reach down into any lake and pull up a bucket of soil, it would not be dry. How was this land dry? Let's take a closer look. When Scripture says appear, as in make the dry land appear, there is some implication that it may have already existed but was covered by water, that God pulled it up from under the water. However, he easily could have just caused it to appear out of nothing. Poof! Land. Personally, I suspect on day 3 that the material God used to create the dry land was already in existence from the initial creation, and what we see in these verses is God doing a little remodeling. And what a remodel it was. Imagine standing with the angels and watching the shaking as God pulled some of the dry land up and created depths in the seas to accommodate the runoff. Imagine as God did what he did by his will and his word alone, he appears to have also created a science we call isostasy. This word means equal weights. I have learned that the continents sit on the surface above the sea level as they are composed of felsic, a granite or silica composition. The ocean crust is denser and composed of mafic or basaltic composition. The result is the ocean crust sinks relative to the continental crust, causing the formation of the ocean basins. Makes me sound pretty smart, huh? Not even close. I need to give credit for this information in the books by Andrew A. Snelling, Earth's Catastrophic Past, volumes 1 and 2. In Pam's word, as I understand what Mr. Snelling is trying to explain, in general, the stuff that makes up what we call land is lighter than the stuff at the bottom of the seas. The land floats, the ocean floors sink. We have no idea how God did this shifting, moving, measuring of the earth elements in an instant, but he did. God questions his people through the prophet Isaiah, chapter 40, verse 12, with an implied answer. Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, and marked off the heaven by a span, and calculated the dust of the earth by a measure, and weighed the mountains in a balance, and the hills in a pair of scales? The answer: God did. Not chance, not evolution, not an accident of nature. God did it. Think about this creation of land some more. Not only was the land dry enough to embed the plants, which we will see in a minute, but God created the metal ore deposits containing such elements as gold, silver, copper, and tin. He created rocks such as flint, as well as other compounds like sodium chloride. We call it salt. God designed even the dirt under our feet to benefit his crowning creation, man, and for his well-deserved glory. There is another characteristic that our earth had that is not specifically mentioned. The earth had heat from the very beginning. We know this because the water is liquid. Heat may have come from the light created on day one, or maybe thermal processes occurring under the water, or for some other source. Could be a combination of multiple things. We are not told how the earth was warm, but the earth needed some source of heat to keep water liquid. And that heat also becomes necessary on day 3 to allow the plants God is about to create to survive. Remember, the sun does not show up until day 4. This is another think about it moment. Let's look again at our study verse, Genesis 1:10. God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. Notice the word seas is plural. Now I want you to think about any overhead mapping picture. Land masses are crisscrossed with lakes and rivers and streams, and any of us that have pumped a well handle at Grandma's house know about water wells. Underground water wells are mentioned several times in Scripture. For example, Jesus met the Samaritan woman at Jacob's well. What I'm getting at is we know there is water at various levels underground, as well as lakes, rivers, and streams accessible at ground level. So while the original creation had only one basic landmass, it was most certainly intersected with multiple sources of fresh water, so that all the landmass was fertile and more than able to sustain the life that God was about to put on it. But day 3 is not over yet. In Genesis 1:11-13, then God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees on the earth bearing fruit after their kind with seed in them." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed after their kind, and trees bearing fruit with seed in them after their kind. And God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning, a third day. Imagine God made the first time-lapse movie. Well, not really. But if we were watching, it may have looked like what we know as a time lapse. You know, where you see the seeds sprouting, roots forming, stems reaching above the dirt, leaves growing, flowers opening, trees reaching their heights with fruit of various kinds springing up all over the earth. And it was good. Now, I'm a plant lover, which is difficult to really tell because if a plant is put into my care, its very life is in danger. I kill plants. Not on purpose, but the results are the same. Am I a murderer each time another plant in my care bites the dust? What exactly are plants anyway? I found some great information written by Michael Todhunter, and found in the Answers in Genesis book, the New Answers book number 4. The article is titled Plants, Animals, and Man, All Different. What is the difference between plants and animals or man? For the answer, we need to look at the phrase nefesh chaya. Nefesh chaya is used in the Bible to describe sea creatures, land animals, birds, and man. Nefesh is never used to refer to plants. Man is specifically denoted as nefesh chaya, a living soul, after God breathed into him the breath of life. This contrasts with God telling the earth on day 3 to bring forth plants. The science of taxonomy, the study of scientific classification, makes the same distinction between plants and animals. Since God gave only plants, including their fruits and seeds, as food for man and animals, then Adam, Eve, and all animals and birds were originally vegetarian. Plants were to be a resource of the earth that God provided for the benefit of nefesh chaya creatures, both animals and man. Plants did not die, as in mut. They were clearly consumed as food. Scripture describes plants as withering, which means to dry up. This term is more descriptive of a plant or plant parts ceasing to function biologically. Whew, I feel much better now. Clearly, I am not a plant whisperer, but then neither am I a plant murderer. As we will see in our studies ahead, God created plants for the betterment, enjoyment, and needs of mankind, his crowning creation. But just because plants do not have nefesh life, it doesn't mean that plants are not magnificent creations of God, full of wonder and complexity. My original goal for this lesson was to give a full-on look at the wonder of plants. But the more I looked, the more I studied, the more I understood about plants. I realized that it would be a multi-part series all by itself. So, a lesson on botany will have to wait, or we will never ever get through Genesis. What did we learn about creation day 3? God somehow, some way, we do not understand, put dry land on the earth. We do not know for certain whether it was lifted from below the waters or created ex nihilo, poof, land. But I suspect it was lifted from what had already been created on day 1. This land that was separated from the waters was fertile and physically dry enough to accommodate plants. The land, we will learn, had an abundance of elements for man to use, such as gold, silver, copper, and salt. Water was abundant and available for man to use all around the shore of the land, as well as through wells, rivers, and streams crisscrossing the land. The land sprouted forth plants of every kind, with fruits and seeds and vegetables that were all self-replicating in preparation as food for the animals and mankind that would be created on days 4, 5, and 6. Another miracle day from our Creator God. Again, if you could be so kind as to hit that like button, share these videos with your friend, and subscribe to this channel, these actions will help convince YouTube algorithms to suggest this video in searches and hopefully bring someone to see the glory of our great and mighty God.